Hello, everybody. Just getting started. Today, I don't know how long I'm going to go. I can never be sure. It always depends on what's going on, how I'm feeling. Anything starts coming up, any issues, I might have to end early. I never know. It's one of the hard things about doing this kind of thing for me. But normally, what I'll expect is start here at 12:30 and then end by 3:30. That's going to be the usual plan. But again, I can't be certain. I don't know how this is going to go. Every day it depends. So, but that's going to be the general goal when I do this. Today, oh man, did it? No, I think we're good. Um, anyway, sometimes I'll be doing some writing on here, sometimes just talking about writing. Today I figured I'd go into a bit of my story. I decided to add some potential donations here for Epilepsy Foundation because of what I deal with. Um, Ironically enough, that's what got me into writing. It's, for me, it's a long story. There's a lot of parts to tell. I've brought it up before, it's come up at times, but I've never really told the whole thing. At least not on the streams, not on my channels yet. There's a lot to it. Uh, oh, 1 second. Some just. Why is it doing this to me? Sorry, I'm having issues right now with something. Let's see if I can get it going. Okay, is that set right? Okay, there we go. That looks better. So to explain a bit, it started when I was about 5. I had what's called herpes encephalitis. You look it up, you look into it, it's considered the worst natural cause for epilepsy. And it said that if you get treated, if you're able to get treatment to stop your seizure, to, control it, you usually, they say, have a pretty good chance of getting through it. But you got the issue of potential brain damage. But if you can't get treatment, certain brain damage, and only a 50-50 chance of getting through it. For me, it was. I shouldn't be here, to put it simply. Um, my dad was a pediatrician. He knew all about this stuff. This was what he did. And it was kind of my mom's worst nightmare. It was something that one day, talking to a friend about a child they knew who was having some terrible cancer, going through some really struggle with treatments, the effects of it, all of that. And it was something that was kind of causing a lot of fear. My mom's friend just really worried, like, this would be the worst thing I want to see my kids have. My mom immediately told her, no, Worst would be herpes encephalitis. It was 2 weeks after she said this that I had my seizure. When it happened, it was at night. It was late. My dad, my mom found me, immediately knew a bit of what was going on. Were able to figure out what was happening and called hospital, got an ambulance to come out. And then, because of how critical this was, because of how strong the seizure was, they also sent a lot of police cars to come and block intersections. So, you can imagine this. We're in the ambulance. I'm still having my seizure. I'm still going into convulsions. We're driving as fast as we can with as few stops as possible. And my dad's trying to give me an IV. Not gonna happen. But it's crucial. The more time it takes, the worse the effects of this. And it just won't happen. Till at one point, he finally just stops, says a prayer, and finds it goes right in. No real effort. We get to the hospital. They rush me inside, and the seizure is not stopping. They find they don't have many options. Nothing's working. So they call downtown Chicago, which we lived in Illinois at the time. And they sent a chopper down to pick me up. They took me downtown, started trying everything they could. The seizure kept going, wouldn't stop. Finally, they just went to my parents and said, "You can go and sit with him. He doesn't have much time left." Nothing they could do. Nothing would stop it. Seizure going that long, they just felt like that was it. No questions, no debates, just it's done. Well, it wasn't until a little later that morning that it finally stopped. And somehow, I got through an 8-hour seizure. Now, after this, they immediately put me on some meds. They tried to give me treatment. And it seemed to be helping, but they only did it temporarily because they figured, that's it. Once this is gone, okay. However, I started having seizures again, but of a different kind. If you don't know much about it, I had temporal lobe seizures called localized, and they're ones that don't affect as wide. A grand mal usually just pretty much affects your whole brain. These were only in certain parts, and because of where they were located, it didn't cause convulsions. It didn't make me black out. It just messed with my thinking, messed with my senses, made it so that I wasn't clear on what was going on around me. I didn't know what to do about it, how to handle it, and I couldn't communicate well. So I didn't know what it was. I hadn't heard about this. One thing it does do a lot of times is it will cause your digestive system kind of tense up, and it'll sometimes cause a lot of nausea. Now, having had this since I was really young, my mind kind of made that connection, and I had this assumption that that's what nausea was, that this was something nausea caused. So I didn't realize it was anything odd. I thought this was something everybody would go through when they were sick. Part of that was because at the time it was pretty weak. It hadn't really gotten to much. So I just made the connection and thought nothing of it. And every time it would come on, I'd go into the bathroom because I might need to throw up. And so nobody would really be around me, talking to me, doing anything while I had one. So this continued for a while. Then, high school, they had escalated. It had gotten more common, stronger, and it got to a point where it wasn't going to go unnoticed. And one day my mom finally actually watched it happen and realized what was going on. And that's when I started trying different medications, started going through treatments. Now these are always tricky. Different people respond different ways, different ones work for different people, and different doses all the time. And I kept trying different ones. And what would happen was I'd seem to have control. It would go for maybe 4 or 6 months, and there'd be hardly anything. But then they'd escalate as though fighting back against the meds, and it would get worse. And it continued this way till we got to a point where one med that seemed to be working reached its max. And we started trying to add another medication on top of it. But it just kept escalating. So finally, my mom was looking things up and decided, what if we tried what's called a temporal lobectomy? Now, what happens with this is they'd go in, they'd try to find out, okay, where's the source? Where's this coming from? And then they'd do a lot of tests, many different kinds. Your usual MRIs, EEGs, although one thing we did have to do at one point was I was in the hospital for about a week so that they could keep me on an EEG 24/7 to observe what happens when I have a seizure and exactly where it's at. The weird one came after that. It's called a WADA test. What they do with this is really bizarre. In these, they kind of put one half of your brain to sleep. And then they'll ask you questions to see how it affects your thinking, how it changes what you're able to do, etc. And for me, it was interesting. One side, they go and they put to sleep, and it almost felt kind of like a seizure. It didn't have this surreal, like really nightmarish sense I usually get with them. But it did affect how well I could communicate the same way. I had trouble finding the right words, thinking things out clearly, things like that. Then they put the other side to sleep. And this is what was really weird for me because I hadn't experienced this before. I it was what was so strange was they started asking me questions, showing me things, saying, "What's this? What does this look like?" Things like that. And I'd be answering, but they'd be acting like I wasn't. And then I'd realize I had no control. It was as though I was paralyzed. When I went to speak, nothing would happen. If I went to reach out or do anything, nothing would happen. It was like I just had no control. So weird. So after all these tests, they finally decided that they knew where it was sourced, where the source was at in my brain. And we're going to go in and do the procedure, which was going to be a long process of going in, making sure, double checking basically what parts of my brain did what, finding where this issue is, and cutting out what they said was about a cubic inch. And so they did this procedure. And what was so weird was when I came out, there were a few doctors in my bed, and they were just looking at me with wide eyes. And I'm just asking him, what's wrong? And he just told me, when we went in, we found that whole part of your brain was already nothing but dead tissue. All the damage the epilepsy caused, you shouldn't be alive. So they had taken out what was already dead. And the seizures stopped for a while. But a lot of other issues came along with it. Constant migraines, a chronic headache, and I truly mean a headache. Not repetitious headaches. A single 24/7 headache. I've gotten used to it. Now, unless I think about it, I don't really notice it. Migraines, still pretty often, but what was really bad at first, before I started to realize part of the problem and what to avoid, I'd get what's called a cluster headache. These are the worst. When you have the pain that comes out of these, you don't know what you're doing. Really. While I was at work and I'd get this, one thing I would do often is I just put my head down against my desk and just push in on it as hard as I could to try and just have some kind of pain other than just that. Then I had somebody come up from other side of a pretty large library, come over and just be like, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I'd be kind of floored why they know to come over, because they couldn't see me from where they were at. And then I realized I wasn't doing what I thought I was doing. I was literally slamming my head on my desk and groaning out with a lot of pain. It was more than I had realized. Looking into it, researching about it, I'd found there were some women who said it was worse than childbirth. It was not fun. Luckily, since then, I found I gotta be careful about lighting. I always use natural lighting when I can. And as much as possible, I avoid any kind of artificial light. My computer screens, I always gotta get a kind that's not going to have any kind of flicker to it. I've got to make sure it is always turned down to the dimmest level. But luckily, with all that, they don't happen anymore. Every now and then I'll get a hint of what could seem like one coming on, but it's never pushed to that point. Now, one thing they told me to do after surgery, they said, give it a year or two, then get off your first medication. After that, wait another year or so, then lower your second medication in half, but stay on that half of the dose and keep it there permanently. So, I told the same thing to a new neurologist I had to go to after the surgery. And after about 2 years, he took me off the first med. Things went well. Still no seizures, nothing. Then a year later, we're going to lower the second medication, but he said I should just get off it. And I was very hesitant. I told him what they'd told me before. Told him how they insisted I need to lower it, but I need to stay on it. And he gave me some arguments that at the time felt somewhat convincing. In hindsight, I realized, no, logic wasn't the best, but he knew how to convince me, and if he was not going to keep, what's the word I'm looking for? Approving of my meds, what was I going to do? So, and as he said, over several months, got off the med. How things got to their best and their worst. Some things that I didn't realize were side effects just were gone and made it so much better in some ways. However, I also had withdrawal. And it was when I went into withdrawal, the grand wells came back. My epilepsy struck again, and worse than it ever had. So now, with another doctor, I'm on another treatment. One thing you might notice every now and then while I'm streaming, I have this magnet keep on my wrist. It's part of what's called VNS therapy. They put a sort of pacemaker here. But then instead of wiring it to my heart, it's wired up to the nerves in my neck, so that it can send a pulse up that just tries to soothe my brain, fight back against seizures that might come on. And I'll tell you, it's very helpful. But after what's happened in the past, my neurologist has decided not to try to just push for full control and just limit them to an extent, and very slowly over time, it might improve. And to an extent, it has. Don't know how far this will go. Part of it has to do with finding more and more things I need to avoid, more and more things I need to be cautious of. But it's improved. And that's why I decided to start this charity. I feel like this is something that when it's at this point where I've gone through all these different treatments, I've had all these different procedures, and it's still there. It won't go away. I feel like Still got a lot of research to do, especially with some of the side effects I've had to deal with in the past with some of the meds. Some of it's terrible. So that's why I decided to start this. But what's ironic, this is the other side of the story. It's because of the seizures that I do the writing I do. Or at least some of it. It's funny, you can get into writing, get into an art for a couple of reasons. One is just, it's a hobby. It's something you like doing. It's something you enjoy. That's why I write fiction. That's what that is for me. Just a hobby I enjoy doing. But then there's the other side. It's when it's something that really fills a hole. Something that really helps you. Maybe it helps you in a way of dealing with something. Maybe it's something that just really strengthens you in some way. For me, it's poetry. And it was something I needed, ironically, because of my epilepsy. One thing it does, especially when you have it constantly, is it can make it harder to think as quickly, harder to communicate well. And what this can do is, even though you may understand what's going on around you, you may be able to think through things well, you may not keep up because your brain may not process it quite as fast. May still do it well enough, it just takes a little bit longer. That's what really makes it so that I couldn't really get into conversations much. I'd be there, I'd be talking to two or more people. They'd be talking about something, and I'd be thinking about it. And when I came to something I'd want to say, the conversation has already gone somewhere else, and I'm too late. And so I usually just listened. I didn't talk much, I didn't say much. I just kept quiet. Well, that ended up just having a really, really bad effect. The problem is, so much got held inside. I started having trouble with my temper. It got bad. Then it was one class in high school. A teacher just assigned to write some poetry. And I had tried once or twice before. I was very disappointed with what I did. So I went up to her and I just told her, look, I've tried this before. I'm not good at it. I don't know what I'd do to try to do this well. And never forget what she said, and always be so grateful for it. She would just look at me and say, stop trying. Don't worry about making this good. Say what you want to say. And it was writing that. I wrote one, and the next thing I knew, I wrote another 5. Then a couple more. I couldn't stop. Because it gave me a way of letting it all out. Everything that had been piling up in there finally came out. Because I couldn't communicate well when having a conversation, I had to do it through my writing. And so my poetry wasn't about this is what I wanted to do. Wasn't about this is what I enjoyed doing, though I did. This was about this is something I need to do. Because I need to let it out. I need to find this balance. And I need to really hear myself, hear what is going on up here that I need to deal with. And that helped me do it. So now, that's what I do. If I decide to write and I just feel like writing, usually I'll go and I'll work on some fiction. If I decide to write because I feel like I just need to let something out, I always go to poetry. They both have their own uses. From both what my professors have said and what I've seen, I would say poetry is my strong suit. And I'm not surprised. It's what I had to do. It's what I was really pushed with. Either way, it's funny how either way of it coming about, whether it be something you just want to do, something you enjoy, or something you need to do, either way, it really motivates you. And that's what you always have to have. Some kind of motivation beyond just maybe wanting to be popular, maybe wanting to impress. Because then it's not about the writing, it's about what you do with it after. It's got to be about the writing of it itself. So that's why I'm doing this. That's why for a while I've kind of wanted to do workshops, classes, things like that. But I just, because of my condition, I can't do that. I had to give up jobs I had, which was teaching, because I couldn't do it. So now, trying to do something like that, might be able to do something online, but it's not the kind of thing where I can do it consistently enough. And so this, I feel like this is the best way to try to get back into that. And that's what I want this to be. Sometimes, yeah, I'll do my writing here, I'll share my writing here. But I want this to be more of helping others, getting others involved in it, sharing with them, them sharing with me, just working on it together. That's why I do the videos that are more of lessons in a sense. But I also want to do live streams where it can be more of almost a workshop. Just talking about writing. Getting your feedback on what I'm doing. Things like that. Okay, I think that's really all I wanted to talk about for now. What I'm going to do some more of is I am going to do some writing here on stream. I'm in the middle of a book. I'll explain a bit about it in a minute. But I'm going to work on that for most of the stream. But right now, I just need a couple minutes. So I'll be back in a few. Hey, back. This is something I've been working on. I've been doing it on Twitch quite a bit. But for anybody who comes to watch this on YouTube, let me explain a bit. I had several friends recently move to Texas. The reason they moved there is they ended up joining a cult. Sadly, this is a place that people haven't fully realized what it is yet. It's a place that's been hiding itself very well. And I had a really hard time getting information when I found out what they were doing. So I looked into it, I did some research, and as I found issues and realized what it was, I decided I kind of needed to try and warn people, let people know. So I have another channel on YouTube that I do all about this call to expose it, show people what it is, what it teaches, what it does, all of that. And after doing this channel for a while, I had a friend come and suggest I write a book on it. And he was pretty persuasive. And I started, and that's what this is. I am currently on my 8th chapter, in the middle of writing it. And I've already gone through chapters on its past, its history, a bit of what cults are, what they do, how they work, a bit about this cult in particular and what they teach. Then a little bit about getting somebody out of cult. And now this chapter is focused on primarily what to do once somebody comes out, once somebody realizes the issues, realizes this is a cult and they need to get out. So, I'm working on this now. That's what I'll be doing unless I start having a conversation with somebody. But for now, I'm just going to work on editing and writing this chapter for the rest of the stream. So, anything curious about, want to talk about, anything in this you find interesting, let me know. It's what I really want this to be, but until I get more viewers, I have to fill it with things like this. Man, sorry about that. Hmm. Um, a little's going on this way. I might have to stop early. A little bit ago, if you didn't notice, I had to fight one off really quick. I don't want to push much further if I'm not getting anybody to talk with. If nobody's watching, I don't want to spend more time on than I need to when that's happened. So I'm gonna try to finish this section and then stop. It's a little bit more to that, and then I think I'm done for that part. Okay, still some more to go, but that's it for that part. Let's see where we at. Not bad. Okay, I think that'll be it for the stream. It's a little happening uh, outside of that aura. I don't want to push any further. So, anybody who might be watching, I hope you have a good day. Things are going well. I'll hopefully see you another time. And God bless.